Hello and welcome to this class on hydrogen and its compounds. This is the part 1. We'll be needing 3 lectures for this so-called family. Are you able to hear me? Please raise your hands. Okay, good. We sometimes call this as hydrogen family. But that family contains only one member, that is hydrogen itself. Just like in your mathematics, a set carrying only one number, but it is a set carrying one digit or number. So hydrogen is an element. It has dual positions in the periodic table that you know from your class 9, that it has no fixed position. You can place it in group 1 along with alkali metals, though hydrogen is not a metal. Also, you can put it here along halogens. In fact, hydrogen is subjected to a lot of injustice because it has no proper place in the periodic table. It has no proper place in the periodic table. And what are the similarities with group 1? Why we can keep hydrogen among alkali metals, although hydrogen is not a metal, because like alkali metals, it can form monopositive ion by losing one electron. Like alkali metal ions, which are obtained at the cathode during electrolysis, hydrogen ion also will be discharged as hydrogen gas at cathode because it is in the form of a positive ion H+. Like the alkali metals, hydrogen is also a strong reducing agent. H2, I'm talking of H2. Here I was talking of H+. And the electronic configurations are same. Alkali metals is NS1, hydrogen 1s1. Each of them contains one electron in the valence shell and in the s orbital. Like alkali metals, hydrogen also combines with most nonmetals. So these are some of the similarities with alkali metals. And there are also many dissimilarities because hydrogen has also many similarities with staunch nonmetals. Staunch nonmetals like halogens. So hydrogen, being a nonmetal, is bound to have many similarities with other nonmetals like halogens. The similarities are hydrogen forms covalent compounds with other nonmetals like halogens, HCl, or say H2O, Cl2O, NH3, NCl3. So like halogens, hydrogen also forms covalent bonds with nonmetals. And in fact, I told you that it is a nonmetal like halogens. It can form a negative ion, mononegative ion, hydride ion by accepting one electron and acquiring helium configuration. You don't write anything now. I will tell you when to write. And it forms metallic hydride, NaHCH2, like that. And if you carry out electrolysis to metallic hydrides, hydride ion will be discharged at the anode, unlike in acid medium where hydrogen gas is obtained at the cathode. Here, the molten metallic hydride ion will be discharged at anode by losing electron. Like halide ion, chloride ion giving chlorine, bromide ion giving bromine, hydride ion giving hydrogen. And the electronic configurations are one sort of the next noble gas. Hydrogen is just before helium. It is one sort of helium configuration. So also other halogens, which are one electron short from their corresponding noble gases next to them. And most importantly, like halogens, hydrogen is also a diatomic molecule called dihydrogen, and it has got high ionization enthalpy like halogens, not greater than halogen, but high ionization enthalpy to remove an electron from the gaseous atom, and also high electron gain enthalpy, numerically high electron gain enthalpy. We shall see to the data later. Now, what are the differences from group 1 and 17? There are so many differences that hydrogen ion, unlike alkali metal ion, they never exist freely. In the free state, it never exists. It always is hydrated in the form of hydronium ion. This is in water. It exists as hydronium ion, H3O plus, and some of them also coordinated with another water. The hydronium ion coordinated with another water gives H5O2 plus, called the Jundel ion. Have you ever heard Jundel ion? That is H5O2 plus. This H3O plus coordinated with another water. H3O plus coordinated with 3 water molecules. 3 water molecules. So this is called Eisen ions, H9O4 plus. So these are some of the exotic ions from H plus. But usually we recommend students to write H3O plus in aqueous solution. H plus doesn't exist. It remains as H3O plus, but some of them can also remain as H5O2 plus or H9O4 plus. And many other similar hydrated hydronium ion. Still you don't write anything. Abundance, you know, the entire universe is abundantly filled with hydrogen. 70% of the entire universe is hydrogen, because all stars and sun are burning due to hydrogen combustion. Fusion reactions are taking place. It cannot be called combustion, rather the fusion reaction are taking place incessantly, continuously. So we are getting energy. Sun is the source of all power in the planet Earth because of that fusion reaction going on incessantly. Now, in the Earth atmosphere, it is very scanty, very few. But inside the Earth crust, in the combined form, it is 15.4%. And also in plants and animals, it remains in the combined form in proteins, in carbohydrates, and all other biomolecules. Hydrogen is omnipresent in biolife. Now, this is of historical significance. Robert Boyle first prepared it with iron and acid. Henry Cavendish recognized it. Lavoisier named it. Another scientist very recently, 1931, Urey, he separated deuterium, an isotope, a heavier isotope of hydrogen, H12 or D12, from hydrogen gas. Very successfully separated and found that hydrogen is having one more isotope. By that time, tritium was not discovered. So he for the first time discovered, not only separated, but also discovered deuterium, 1931. And in 1934, 3 years later, Rutherford, Oliphant, and Hartrick, not Hartrick, they discovered that is another radioactive isotope of hydrogen that is called tritium. Now, protium the abundance is nearly 100%. Natural abundance is nearly 100%. It is called light hydrogen or ordinary hydrogen. Then deuterium is called heavy hydrogen. The percentage is so small, 0.0156%. But this is natural. It is always present. The water you drink contains this percentage of deuterium, heavy water. You are also drinking heavy water, but it is a negligible percent. Now, tritium in nature, it is almost negligible. Trace 10 to the power minus 15%. So it is not counted. Nowadays, tritium is prepared synthetically for fusion reaction, artificial fusion reactions. In nature, it is almost extinct, is not. And it is a radioactive isotope having half-life period of 12.33 years. Every 12.33 years, half of it will decay. We will learn what will be decay products later, not now. It will produce a beta particle and another product. Let us forget about that. And I have already told about Urey. And interestingly, the HH bond energy is slightly less than that of DD bond energy. We're talking about bond energy the other day, that because of greater number of neutron, one neutron, the nuclear pull is more, and this bond is stronger, little stronger. The bond dissociation energy of HH is less than that of DD. And tritium bond is still greater. I'll give you the data. Now you must write, you must pick up. This is important for your examination. These are called spin isomers. Now try to listen first. I'll give you some time to write. There are two spin isomers of hydrogen. What are spin isomers? One is called orthohydrogen, the other one is called parahydrogen. In orthohydrogen, the two nuclei, let's say this is one hydrogen, this is the proton, this is another hydrogen, this is the proton, that is the nucleus, and these are the two electrons which are localized in the common space of overlap to form a covalent bond. But the nucleus, which is only in the proton in case of H2, if it is D2, then proton, neutron, proton, neutron. If it is T2, then proton, 2 neutrons, proton, 2 neutrons. So I'm talking of orthohydrogen. When I say hydrogen, I mean protium, diprotium, H2. Now there will be proton only as nuclei. Now when these two nuclei spins, because if you do not know, now you know that the nucleus is not also fixed. It is spinning, not executing translatory motion, but it is spinning about its own axis. If this proton or nucleus is spinning clockwise and the other nucleus or proton is spinning in the same direction, also clockwise, then such a covalently bonded H2 molecule will be called orthohydrogen. So this proton is moving, supposing clockwise, spinning, and this proton also clockwise, then it is orthohydrogen. You forget about electron. Electron is spinning, it is localized here. This is a borrowed diagram, so forget about this electron spin, because it is forming a covalent molecule and it is localized in the common space of overlap, that is BBT. And according to MOT, as you know, the two electrons are localized in a sigma bonding MO sigma 1s2. So it is always better in a picture, in a diagram, to show VBT rather than MOT. So this is a misleading diagram where electron is saying is rotating in opposite. It's not rotating, it is spinning in opposite direction here, right? So they're localized, but it is spinning. Electrons are not revolving now. Once it forms a bond, it never rotates. It spins in opposite direction. This is the covalent bond, and the nucleus here spins clockwise, and this is also clockwise. Then it is called orthohydrogen. This will be called ortho. And if it spins in opposite direction, if it spins clockwise and the other proton spins anti-clockwise in opposite direction, then such hydrogen molecule is called parahydrogen. Right? So that's what I'm saying. I'm giving you a model where this is a proton. It's not the entire atom. This is simply the nucleus. This nucleus is rotating clockwise so that its magnetic field, if you apply the Fleming's rule, is upwards. And the other proton is spinning anti-clockwise. Its magnetic field is opposite. In that case, it is called parahydrogen. And if one spins clockwise, the other also spins clockwise. Or the other way, one spins anti-clockwise, the other also spins anti-clockwise. So it means the same. If the two spins are parallel, then it is ortho. If they're anti-parallel, it is para. So there is always a mixture of ortho and para. In hydrogen gas is made up of an equilibrium mixture of certain percentage of ortho and certain percentage of para hydrogen. Though the properties are different between para and ortho, but hydrogen, since it is a mixture of ortho and para, it shows average property. The average density, every property will be the average, weighted average of the two isomers. These are called spin isomers. Orthohydrogen sometimes called triplet state. You will know why it is called a triplet state later. And parahydrogen, if the spins are parallel, like Horn's rule, parallel, then it is called triplet. The two spins are parallel, it is called triplet. If they are anti-parallel, paired, it is called singlet state. Singlet state. Right? Now, most interesting thing about orthoparahydrogen is orthohydrogen is thermodynamically less stable than para. Just look to my hand. If orthohydrogen, the enthalpy is here, the energy, its potential energy is here. Its its enthalpy is here. Then para is here. So it is more stable. And when ortho will be converted to para, this amount of energy will be released. So this is an exothermic conversion. Heat will be written in the right side. Ortho to para conversion is always going on. And at any fixed temperature, there is an equilibrium mixture, maybe 75-25, maybe 50-50, maybe this may be 1%, this may be 99%. But the conversion is exothermic, right? But the equilibrium constant is less than 1. We will learn about equilibrium later. The equilibrium constant is less than 1 for this reaction, so that always there is a preponderance of ortho form. The percentage of ortho is more than para at room temperature, particularly at room temperature. However, at room temperature, don't forget this. However, at room temperature, equilibrium constant is less than 1. Let us forget about free energy change is positive. We'll learn about this in thermodynamics. When free energy change will be positive, then equilibrium constant will be less than 1. If it is negative, it will be greater than 1. All these things will be discussed in our thermodynamics program. And on calculation and also tallying with the reality, it has been found at room temperature, the percentage of ortho is 3 times greater than that of para. Although para is more stable than ortho, many students, they are misinformed that para is less stable than ortho. Why the logic? They say that since the abundance of ortho is 75%, para is 25% at room temperature. That is why ortho is more stable. No. The abundance is related to equilibrium constant. And the equilibrium constant is related to delta G, free energy change. And that in turn depends on two factors. The enthalpy change, that is of course negative, it will come. But another factor which you do not know is the entropy factor. I told you that during dissolution, dissolution of ionic compounds in water, why many ionic compounds dissolve, although the dissolution process is endothermic. I mean, the net change of energy, heat energy is positive. Even then, the free energy change is becoming negative, so that the equilibrium constant, I mean, therefore it is a spontaneous process. And here you find delta G value is positive, equilibrium constant is less than 1. The definitely entropy factor is responsible to make it less than 1. And as a result, the percentage of para is less. But that doesn't mean that thermodynamically para is less stable. It is more stable than ortho. Why? The evidence comes from the fact that when you cool hydrogen gas, the percentage of para form increases from 25. It goes on steadily increasing. I show you the table. At 25 degrees Celsius, that is at room temperature, only 25% para. And you cool down to ice temperature, 0 degrees Celsius, 25 is changed to 25.13. At minus 120 degrees Celsius, it becomes 28.54. Still, there is the dominance of orthoform. At minus 198 degrees Celsius, that is at liquid nitrogen temperature, liquid air temperature, it becomes nearly 50-50. That only is achieved as low temperature, as low as the liquid nitrogen temperature or liquid air's temperature. And if you further cool down to liquid hydrogen temperature, it is 99.82%. And if you further cool down to liquid helium temperature, nearing minus 273, of course, 0 Kelvin is non-achievable. It is non-achievable, but close to minus 273, it will be nearly 100%. It is never 100%, 99.9999, but never 100%. So as you cool, the percentage of para form increases. Why? Because para is here, ortho is here, and you are removing heat. You are cooling means you are removing heat. So more and more ortho forms are falling down to the para form, and therefore percentage of para increases. That proves that para is thermodynamically more stable than ortho. And therefore, in the equation I have shown you that ortho to para conversion is exothermic. Heat is evolved. That is why para is at a lower level than ortho. Right? I have written all these things at liquid nitrogen temperature, minus 196 Celsius or 77 Kelvin, nearly 50%. At 20 Kelvin, that is liquid hydrogen temperature, 99.82%. And at near 0 Kelvin, 0 Kelvin is non-achievable, but near 0 Kelvin, percentage of para form is nearly 100%. Almost pure para form, no ortho. But the conversion of ortho to para, even if you lower down the temperature, is a slow process. Kinetically, it is a slow process. To hasten up, to increase the rate of conversion, we add some catalysts. Even if you cool down, the process of conversion from ortho to para is slow. So charcoal, ferric oxide or chromic oxide, these are added as catalysts to speed up the conversion process. Are you able to hear me? Raise your hands. That's great. We are going fine? Okay. And if you lend me your entire focus, and if you are a bit conversant with writing inorganic equations, which in some time you will do, you will love to maintain a separate copy, writing by yourself. This you are just watching me, and if possible, you write down some important points as much as you can, and I'll tell you when to write. And once converted to room temperature, it reverts back to the same 3:2. Supposing you again heat it to room temperature, but it becomes slow. Once you have converted more para by cooling down and supporting catalytic action, then if you want to raise the temperature will come to 25, but the para to ortho conversion will take a lot of time. Once converted, reverting back to original equilibrium mixture, even at room temperature, is slow. It takes time. The increased percentage of para is sustained for a very long time. After maybe 1 day, 2 days, 75-25 equilibrium mixture will be re-established. Ortho will be hero now. But the hero cannot be a king. If you increase the temperature, you cannot extend the same analogy by decreasing the temperature, para increases. So increasing the temperature, ortho might increase more than 75. No, it never happens. It remains the same because you do not know the thermodynamics part of it, delta G part of it. So that delta G factor will make it equilibrium constant not to change. If you increase the temperature, the equilibrium constant is not going to change significantly or even appreciably. So the ortho-para ratio remains more or less 3:1, even if you increase the temperature. But in some texts, you might find otherwise, that increasing the temperature increases the ortho percentage. No, here thermodynamics is involved. Just it is a speculation of maybe some students that it happens, the reverse doesn't. But at low temperature, supposing you have lowered down the temperature to liquid nitrogen temperature, you are getting 50% para. But you want at that temperature to again convert to ortho. That you can do. You want the hydrogen to remain at low temperature, but we don't want para. So para to ortho conversion at low temperature can be achieved by adding some paramagnetic species like oxygen, which has 2 unpaired electrons, or nitric oxide, which has 1 unpaired electron. But in no case the percentage of ortho can exceed 75%. Thermodynamically forbidden. So this is the thing that you must be very particular in your writing, that it is 3:1 at room temperature. Even above room temperature, it is 3:1. And lowering down the temperature increases para and it becomes nearly 100% at 0 Kelvin. But if you want to convert para to ortho at low temperature, then you have to add some paramagnetic species. But even then, the percentage of ortho cannot exceed 75%. And if you just bring the temperature back to room temperature, the conversion from para to ortho and re-establish equilibrium 75-25 is very slow. You have to wait, right? Then these things, you don't write anything. Like ortho hydrogen, there are 2 spin isomers of ortho deuterium and para deuterium. Each nucleus is having 1 more neutron along with a proton. But it has been found that the ortho-para conversion is an endothermic process, unlike ortho-hydrogen to para-hydrogen, which was exothermic. Heat was written here. Now, in ortho-deuterium to para-deuterium, heat is written here. But this case too, the entropy factor, which you do not know, also supports the equilibrium constant is less than 1 as expected from the enthalpy factor. And the previous case, it was surprising. It was an endothermic process and equilibrium constant is less than 1. That is, a common man will understand it. And therefore, when you lower down the temperature, tell me which isomer will be more and more abundant. Raise your hand. I would ask you the question. Digdarshan has, I will be definitely ask you to unmute. Which one will have more and more abundance as you lower down the temperature?
Sir, para will be having more.
Devanshu?
Sir, ortho.
Precisely. Precisely, Devanshu is correct. Devanshu is correct. Because in the earlier case, heat was here. Here, this is heat. That means, have a look. Here, orthohydrogen is more stable than para. There, orthodeuterium is more stable than para. Like this. Okay. This. Orthohydrogen is the supposing the reactant. Orthodeuterium is the reactant and para-deuterium is the product. So ortho is less stable, more stable than para-deuterium. So that extra energy is absorbed. But in that case, orthohydrogen was less stable, para-hydrogen was more stable. So when ortho to para conversion happens, then this amount of energy is released. But in case of deuterium, this is the opposite. So to convert orthodeuterium to para-deuterium, some extra energy has to be absorbed. So that when temperature will be reduced, to whatever para will be there, they will be dropping back to ortho by releasing energy. Because you are removing heat energy by cooling down, you are removing energy. So those which are in the higher energy level, that is the para form, they will fall down to the ortho form. So the percentage of ortho will increase. But at equilibrium, at room temperature, the equilibrium constant is less than 1, no doubt, but not 3:1. The ratio is 2:1. Ratio is 2:1, 67.66%, 66.67%. This is 33.33%. 2:1 ratio. That was 3:1 ratio. But the common point is that ortho is more abundant than para. The uncommon point is that lowering down the temperature increases the ortho form for deuterium, but increases the para form in hydrogen. That is the uncommon factor. The common factor is the equilibrium constant is less than 1 for both. But ratio was different, 3:1. Here it is 2:1. But the uncommon factor, or the decrease of temperature, cooling down, increases para hydrogen, while increases orthodeuterium. I have written it categorically. Decrease in temperature therefore brings about increase in percentage of ortho form. There it was para form. As temperature is lowered, percentage of para form increases. It is the opposite here. Now this LCP Lee-Chatelier principle, you will be learning that you can apply this principle also to know why the percentage of one form is increasing. This is Lee-Chatelier's principle. We will discuss about that later in our equilibrium program. Now even water, our water has also ortho and para water, because there are 2 hydrogen atoms. So if the 2 hydrogen atoms, although they are remotely connected, not directly connected with each other, they are remotely connected, the central atom is oxygen, but even then the 2 hydrogen atom, the nuclear spins might be parallel or it may be anti-parallel. But in the earth, whatever water we have, the ratio between ortho water and para water is 3:1. Is 3. Ortho para ratio is 3:1. Now this is not important. Then we talk about the different forms of hydrogen. One is atomic hydrogen. Earlier we were talking of H2. H2D2. This is atomic hydrogen. When you allow a hydrogen gas to a electric spark, a high voltage electric arc, or allow strong ultraviolet radiations onto hydrogen gas, then the HH covalent bond will break down, requiring 104 kilocalories per mole of bonds. So this is the bond dissociation energy in terms of kilocalories per mole. So that will produce hydrogen atoms. These are called atomic hydrogen, which are very short-lived. They will live for a very short time. And during that time, if you can utilize them, then it can do wonders. They're very reactive, a strong reducing agent, much stronger than hydrogen molecule. It can reduce all oxidants at room temperature, which was needing much higher temperature. As a hydrogen gas, hydrogen atom will reduce even at room temperature. It can produce hydrogen peroxide at room temperature, which hydrogen molecule cannot. So, but it is short-lived and you need to apply electric arc to get it. So its application is very limited. It was used earlier as atomic hydrogen torch. Why? Because once you create hydrogen atom by ultraviolet radiation or by applying electric arc, you prepare a hydrogen atom cylinder, because its life is very, very short. Then you allow hydrogen atoms to strike on a metal plate. So there will be recombination between the two hydrogen atoms. The opposite reaction will take place. The two hydrogen get combined due to form H2 molecule, and the same quantity of heat will be released at the metallic surface. So that will melt the metal at that point and it will help in welding. So welding of metals and alloys was done by using atomic hydrogen torch. Nobody does that now. It's more, uneconomical than by using other sources like oxyhydrogen flame or oxyacetylene flame. But it is more powerful. Sometimes it is needed. Supposing we need to weld tungsten metal or some noble metals, it requires very high temperature. So that can be possible by hydrogen torch, atomic hydrogen torch. Now, coming to the class 8 study, how to prepare dihydrogen. When you say hydrogen, we mean dihydrogen H2. How to prepare? There are so many ways. One of the ways is displacement of hydrogen from water. And those which are very strong metals, much above hydrogen in the electrochemical series, or as you call metal activity series, like lithium, sodium, calcium, potassium, rubidium, cesium. These strongly active metals, they displace hydrogen even from cold water. But little less reactive metals, but they're above hydrogen, but less reactive, like magnesium, aluminum, iron, zinc, tin, they react with water under boiled condition, boiled water or steam. And invariably remember that when you use steam, you don't get hydroxide, you get oxide. But when you get boiled water, you get hydroxide. This is the trick you have to remember. Steam, if it is supposing magnesium plus water in between brackets steam, then magnesium oxide. But all these strongly active metals, they will produce hydroxide. But I'm talking of less active metals. And aluminum is very less reactive, but when you make it an amalgam, by making an alloy with mercury, it reacts readily, but under boiled water condition to give you aluminum hydroxide, hydrogen, and this mercury is set free. And iron, is very interesting, that all of you have studied in your class 10 book. Find a red hot iron reacts with water in the form of superheated steam to form ferrosulfuric oxide or magnetic oxide and hydrogen. If I ask you what is the change in oxidation number of elements, you will say iron is in 0 state, and here it is average plus 8/3. Although that is a paradox. There is no iron having plus 8 by 3. 1 is plus 2 and 2 are in plus 3. It is a combination of FeO and Fe2O3. It's a mixed oxide. This is a combination of FeO dot Fe2O3, ferrous oxide and ferric oxide. If you add them, it will become Fe3O4. That is why we call it ferroso-ferric oxide. So average oxidation number will come 8 by 3, but actually plus 2 is 1 and plus 3, there are 2 iron in the plus 3 state. So the average becomes plus 2, plus 3, plus 3, plus 8 by 3 atoms. So the average is plus 8 by 3. And hydrogen goes from plus 1 to 0 and iron goes from 0 to average plus 8 by 3. That is the status of redox reaction. Now, you need not write these things. Ortho para, they are important for you now to just write down a bit. I told you that whatever writing you make with me in this lecture, those will be rough, but you will be preparing a full length fair copy, inorganic copy in a separate copy. The other one is displacement from dilute acids, but non-oxidizing. That means HCl and dilute sulfuric acid. Dilute hydrochloric, dilute sulfuric acid. These are the two non-oxidizing acids. These active metals all, even up to lead, which cannot displace hydrogen from water, it will displace hydrogen from dilute acids, right? But these are the two metals, magnesium and manganese, both starting from the letter M. They will displace hydrogen from there will be two very dilute nitric acid, 1% nitric acid by weight, by volume, I'm sorry, W by V. Otherwise, nitric acid will never ever give hydrogen. It will give either N2 or NO or NO2 or even ammonium nitrate, depending on concentration. But magnesium and manganese, these are the two unfortunate metals. I say unfortunate because no other metal will give hydrogen, even under low concentration condition. And magnesium and manganese, they give, right? And amphoterism, if you are not new to amphoterism, you will definitely not feel frustrating or monotonous. These are very familiar with you. There are some elements, some of them are metals, some are metalloids like silicon, boron, aluminum, zinc, tin, lead, boron, silicon. These have dual properties. They act as, they're oxides. And here the metals. Here the metals themselves or the element themselves, they react with strong base like NaOH or KOH to produce hydrogen. Zinc plus sodium hydroxide to form sodium zincate. This is the simple formula often you write in your examination, Na2ZnO2 plus hydrogen. But actually the formula of zincate is ZnOH whole 4 2 minus. We simplify by removing 2 water from here and make it ZnO2. The actual formula of zincate ion is ZnOH whole 4 in between parentheses and then big bracket 2 minus. Similarly, tin gives plus 4 state. Interestingly, tin has 2 states, stannous and stennic. But here, the oxidation number, I'm sorry, I have to ink, goes from 0 to plus 4. This is the way you write, 0 to plus 4, stannate, and hydrogen from plus 1 to 0. But for if you remember that unless you take the help of water, you cannot balance it. You cannot. So sometimes water is a player for material balance, right? So, but zinc has no variable valence, it goes to plus 2 state. Lead, because the plus 4 state of lead is unstable due to inert pair effect, it goes to +2 state. That is plumbite, not plumbate. But here you have to remember that thene goes to +4 state, giving you stannate, not stannite. Aluminum has no variable valency, so this is aluminate. I say it meta-aluminate because there is another aluminate called orthoaluminate, ALO3, which is also formed, but predominantly meta-aluminate is formed. But in every literature, you will be finding it as aluminate, simply aluminate. It's not wrong, but it should be correctly meta-aluminate. But the actual formula of meta-aluminate, as you know, AlOH(4) This is the cheating formula that you can sometimes use just for saving time. And of course, the examiner won't be unhappy. Right? The actual formula is this. So you must write down all this with details. And in pencil, you always mark the oxidation number. Oxidation number is a theoretical tool to see what is the fate of this element and whether it is oxidizing or reducing, and to balance they are to be assigned, and the changes of one to be multiplied as coefficients with the other, and then going for hit and trial. So these things, oxidation number concept is a very application oriented theoretical tool. It's a theoretical tool, right? So always put that oxidation number by using a pencil over the atom, so that at a later stage you can rub off, you can remove it after balancing, for example. This is amphoterism. You can get hydrogen gas. Now, you can also use metallic hydride like calcium hydride, sodium hydride, and add water. It will vigorously produce hydrogen gas. Can you tell me which is oxidized, which is reduced? You know, hydrogen has gone from -1 to 0. This hydrogen is +1 to 0. It is a kind of comproportionation reaction. Comproportionation, just the opposite of disproportionation reaction. Here it was -1, it comes to 0. Here it is +1, it comes to 0. Same thing happens here, sodium hydride giving you hydrogen. Now, it's important is how we get hydrogen in a large scale basis, that is industrial manufacture of hydrogen. That is done by many methods. One is the SMR reaction, that is steam methane reforming reaction. The other one is called the water gas shift reaction. The water gas shift WGS reaction. Cracking of hydrocarbons is the third method. Electrolysis of water is the fourth. We'll be discussing one by one. What is steam methane reforming process, SMR process? In fact, in SMR process, the water gas shift reaction is a part. Ultimately, you have to go for the water gas shift reaction to get hydrogen. But in the first step in SMR process, methane, which is abundantly present in natural gas, which consists of methane predominantly, that methane is mixed with steam at a elevated temperature of 700 to 1000 centigrade, high pressure of 3 to 25 bar in presence of nickel catalyst. So this will produce the syngas or water gas, a mixture of carbon monoxide and hydrogen. Combination of CO and H2 is called water gas. Earlier it was called water gas because, it was formed by the carbonization of coal. I'll talk about that later. But nowadays it is called syngas, a mixture of carbon monoxide and hydrogen. It is formed by SMR process, steam methane reforming process. But this process includes water gas shift reaction. Our purpose is to get hydrogen gas. Okay, it is already hydrogen gas is there, but still we are not happy. because hydrogen is a fuel, carbon monoxide is a fuel. We want hydrogen economy. We don't want carbon monoxide. So to convert carbon monoxide to carbon dioxide, we need the help of water gas shift reaction. This is water gas. Not in the ratio 1:1, but 1:3. Syngas or water gas. Not in the ratio 1:1, it's 1:3. So that is shifted to carbon dioxide. So what happens? This is mixed with extra steam. This syngas is added with extra steam and with some catalyst. I'll tell you later what catalyst you will be using. It is detailed later, to convert all the carbon monoxide to carbon dioxide and hydrogen. Of course, here it is one hydrogen. And of course, earlier there were 3 hydrogen, it will be 4 hydrogen. If the entire thing is written here, CO plus 3H2, CO plus another 3H2 plus water, then it will be 4H2. But I am writing only the carbon monoxide part of the syngas. Doesn't matter whether it is 3 mole now, or if you heat coal with steam or any other carbon source with steam and get syngas, the ratio might be different from 1:3. So the carbon monoxide part is converted to carbon dioxide. Now the carbon dioxide is easily removed. It is an acidic gas. You can absorb it in a basic solution like sodium bicarbonate or sodium carbonate, or by sucking or scrubbing with sodium arsenite. It will absorb carbon dioxide, and then hydrogen will be set free. Now let's discuss in detail what is water gas shift reaction. You can independently use from other source if you get carbon monoxide and hydrogen syngas from other source, not through SMR process. You can also convert it to carbon dioxide by mixing with steam with using this high temperature shift catalyst, HTS catalyst, high temperature shift catalyst, that consists of mixture of ferric oxide, chromic oxide, magnesium oxide. This combination is called HTS catalyst at a high temperature, or you can use iron chromate as HTS at high temperature, so that you convert the water gas, whether it is, I've taken is 1:1 ratio that is obtained by this reaction. That is the first method to get syngas, is the coal gasification. I wrongly said carbonization, I'm sorry. Coal gasification, you treat coal with steam at a high temperature, you get the same syngas. The ratio is 1:1. I've written it here. You can read 1:3, so that it will be 4 here. It is 1:1. So that hydrogen will be there. Then additionally, carbon monoxide will be converted to carbon dioxide, and one more hydrogen will be here. So that will be, and CO2 can be easily separated by using any basic substance or by scrubbing with sodium arsenite. Now, electrolysis of brine you will be knowing in alkali metals. This is called Kastner-Kellner method. You will be again studying this in alkali metals. Now, when you electrolyze brine, brine is seawater that contains concentrated sodium hydroxide, sodium chloride. When you electrolyze sodium chloride at a proper voltage by applying a DC battery using mercury cathode, that's the important thing, mercury cathode, then you get at cathode, you get sodium amalgam. You get sodium amalgam. If you do not use mercury cathode, if you use ordinary platinum electrode or graphite electrode, you get hydrogen gas. At cathode, you will never get, you get, since it is it is having some water, concentrated sodium chloride has some water, so hydrogen gas will be obtained, which will be very difficult to control. It will be catching fire. It is a combustible gas. But here, when you use mercury as cathode, you will get at the cathode, you get sodium amalgam. You would take it away, you siphon it to a different place and then add with water. So sodium will react with water giving you this sodium hydroxide, which is another, that's what we will be studying in alkali metal, preparation of sodium hydroxide, and you get hydrogen gas. And mercury will be set free. I have not written here, let me include. Mercury will be released from the jail. It was amalgamated or alloyed, but that alloy will break and mercury will be set free. Now at anode, we don't bother about what happens. Chloride ion will give you chlorine. But at cathode, we are getting sodium amalgam, which we will take it to a different place to react with water to get hydrogen gas. Now cracking, you'll be knowing in organic chemistry very soon, that when a higher hydrocarbon like butane, pentane, hexane from the petroleum fractions, if it is heated at a high temperature in absence of air, then it will crack down, break down to simpler alkanes and alkenes along with hydrogen. Hydrogen is a byproduct in every cracking reaction of higher saturated hydrocarbons, right? You'll be knowing that. Electrolysis, you know it from class 7, that if you add some electrolyte like little bit of acid or sodium chloride, any electrolyte in ordinary water, and put a cathode anode connected to battery, then you get hydrogen gas at the cathode and oxygen gas at the anode. These are the reactions. At cathode, H plus ion from water will give you H2. This equation is for an ordinary student. If you are taking sodium chloride, there is no H plus. Yes, if you are taking acidulated water, sulfuric acid is there, then you have free H plus. When I say free, I mean really hydronium ion, but we don't write. We always commit the same mistake. We commit the same mistake, mistaking. I understand if you are an Indian guy, and you must be knowing the famous Hindi, movie song that I'm translating in English. Of course, I'm sure hardly a non-Indian will watch this program. But even then, I am trying to restrict my language of instruction to the international language, English. Now, this is not the correct representation for a good student. If it is a neutral solution like sodium chloride, sodium chloride is just an electrolyte, but actually it is water which is decomposing to hydrogen, and the OH minus ion is set free, because as if H2O is made up of H plus and OH minus. The bond breaking is occurring there at the cathode, and OH minus is set free, and H plus ion is picking up 1 electron per H plus ion. 2 such H plus ions are giving H2 and 2 OH minus, right? At anode, ordinary guy writes like this: 4 OH minus gives you O2 plus 2 water plus 4E. That is but in a neutral medium, when there is no free OH minus, it is same water which decomposes. So leaving behind H plus, just like in the earlier case, in the previous case, OH minus was left behind. In this case also, H plus ion will be left behind, but oxygen will be formed at the, and the overall reaction after cancelling the common ions on both the sides, you are finding this water getting split up into hydrogen gas and oxygen gas in the ratio 2:1 mole ratio, and hence volume ratio. And you have conducted the electrolysis in your schools, or you have seen in some exhibition that the volume of hydrogen will be 2 times more than the volume of oxygen. And this is an electrolysis experiment, and this guy has done just over a battery, 9-volt battery, keeping the battery inside the electrolyte dissolved in water, and then keeping a test tube inverted over anode and cathode. This is cathode and this is anode. Anion will come to the positive electrode. So this is anode, and the cation will come to the negative electrode, and this is cathode. So, and if you look to we will be doing only the hydrogen preparation and the types of hydrides now. but the compounds, hydrogen peroxide, will be done in a separate lecture. Now, if you look to the property of the three sisters, hydrogen, deuterium, and tritium, you will find the differences, slight differences in all. Abundance, you already know, this is stress, almost extinct. Mass, relative mass, atomic mass, 1, 2, 3. Or if it is a dihydrogen, dideuterium, tritium, it is double, 2, 4, 6. Melting point in Kelvin, it is higher. When you say melting point, we use dihydrogen. We use dihydrogen, this is, say I write X2. Boiling point is not for atom, but this is for atomic mass. Density also X2. Density is also greater for deuterium and still greater for T2. This is H2, D2, T2. Enthalpy of fusion still greater for D2. This data is not available. Enthalpy of vaporization is still greater. Enthalpy, bond enthalpy, I have already told you, I have displayed it much before. It is again DD bond needs more energy. TT bond, I think I have another data where you'll find TT bond, it will be still more, little more. To this data, this is borrowed from some Google source, doesn't carry the data. Internuclear distance between HH and H2 molecule is 74 picometer, and this is same, and this is also same. That is the beauty. The only similarity is their bond length. Same. Ionization enthalpy is different here. The ionization enthalpy data is there. No. Ionization enthalpy data is not there, but it is as high, comparable with a non-metal like chlorine is 1250 kilojoules and hydrogen is 1312. That is why it is similar to a halogen a halogen in its ionization enthalpy property. So also the electron gain enthalpy is 73, and it is comparable to phosphorus is also minus 74, very close. So electron gain enthalpy wise, ionization enthalpy wise, hydrogen is similar to non-metals. That means very close to the halogen family. Radius, covalent radius is 37 here, and this internuclear distance, that is the covalent. No, this is the bond length. I'm sorry, bond length between HH, DD, TT. But this is individual atomic radius. I'm sorry, ionic radius, not atomic radius. The ionic radius is 208 picometer, and here it doesn't carry the data. Atomic mass is there, atomic radius. So these are the data table. Then let us come to the properties of dihydrogen. We're talking of H2. In a later program, we'll be talking of D2 and D2O. Now, boiling point is very low, 20.35 Kelvin, and freezing point is still low, 13.95. Oxidation state, it can go to +1 and -1. It can lose 1 electron, it can gain 1 electron. It reacts with most metals and non-metals, except we'll discuss the details, noble gases. It doesn't react with noble gases. And these three groups of transition metals, group 7, that is manganese group, group 8, the iron group, and nickel group, it doesn't react. I'll tell you the details later. Since hydrogen gas is non-polar, it does not dissolve in water. It is sparingly soluble in water. We can call it insoluble. Slightly soluble in organic solvents like ethanol, but more soluble in non-polar solvents like benzene, carbon tetrachloride, and so on. When hydrogen oxygen is mixed and you apply an electric spark, you get a pop sound, a explosion sound, and you enjoy that sound, and we funnily call pop sound, and you get water and with a lot of energy. This is an exothermic process. Similarly, in the Haber's process, ammonia is synthesized by combining nitrogen with hydrogen with certain a specific catalyst, iron oxide catalyst, and promoter is a mixture of several oxides, potassium, aluminum oxide, molybdenum, magnesium oxide combination. This combination act as promoter. Earlier, only molybdenum was used, but now mix so many mixture. Temperature is 400 to 500 is the optimum temperature, and high pressure of 100 bar or more. Hydrogen can mix with chlorine and you can irradiate with sunlight, it will produce HCl. Fluorine reaction is highly explosive, very dangerous. It reacts with bromine at high temperature and heat and temperature. With iodine, it needs a very high temperature, 444 degrees Celsius to convert to Hi. But others, it can combine with all different non-metals and metals to form hydrides. It can act as a reducing agent at higher temperature to reduce the metallic oxide to their corresponding metals, or from higher oxidation state from +4 state to +2 state. It can combine with some active metals to form their hydrides, where hydride is -1. And we can get methanol. Nowadays, methanol is industrially prepared from hydrogen by mixing with carbon monoxide. That means it is a syngas, 1:2 combination. So that is catalyzed by zinc oxide, chromic oxide mixture catalyst. Temperature is high, pressure is high, so that syngas can be converted to methanol. Organic reactions, it is used as a reducing agent or hydrogenating agent on saturated hydrocarbons having double bond or triple bond that is found in oils. It is converted to saturated compounds called fats, and many other reactions. And many metals like platinum, palladium, nickel, iron, they can adsorb hydrogen gas. Adsorb means it will be retaining hydrogen molecules on the surface. It won't penetrate to the bulk of the substance, the metal, but it will be localized at the upper part, that is at the surface. That is called adsorption. Now we come to the last part of our program. I told you it will be a 1.5 hours program. Uses of hydrogen. I have already told you that hydrogen is used to bring about hydrogenation of oils into fats. Oils contain double bonds, it is unsaturated, and hydrogen addition will make it saturated and that becomes solid. So Banaspati ghee, as you know, is prepared by hydrogenation of oils. And it is adsorbed by many metals which act as catalysts during organic reactions, multitudinous organic reactions. Ammonia is synthesized by the help of hydrogen. Methanol is synthesized. Many chemicals like HCl and many countless chemicals are prepared with the help of hydrogen, metal hydrides and many other chemicals. Atomic hydrogen was used as a torch for cutting and welding metals. It was used as a reducing agent. Nowadays, nobody is interested to use hydrogen, which is a combustible gas, and it is uneconomical to use hydrogen for industrial purpose. It can be used for getting high temperature flame, oxy-hydrogen flame, where you add oxygen, hydrogen together and burn it, so that will give you high temperature. As a rocket fuel, it is used mixed with other fuels. And fuel cells, you know, the electric battery that runs now in the roads of many developed nations, they work on fuel cells, hydrogen oxygen fuel cells. We'll talk about that later, the working principle of fuel cells. You know, heavy hydrogen is used along with hydrogen, protium and tritium in fusion reactions, producing a very large amount of energy. So in fusion processes, mostly tritium and deuterium are used. Do you know what is hydrogen metal? Hydrogen as a metal, yes. Scientists at Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory in US I used very high pressure and very low temperature condition to convert hydrogen gas from diatomic insulator to a monoatomic metal, which is a conductor, at 1.4 megabar pressure. Can you imagine 1.4 in 10 to the 6 at approximately 1.4 in 10 to the 6 atmosphere pressure? It becomes a metal, it becomes atomic, and they are pressed together to form a crystal, a metallic crystal, which has got a, you'll learn about band gap becomes zero. I mean, there is a conduction band, there is a valence band. We'll talk about that later in our solid state program. And when that band gap is reduced to zero, then it acts like a metal, is a good conductor of electricity. So they have prepared hydrogen metal at these conditions, which are not very much commercially viable now. It is in the research state. It is believed that planet Jupiter contains metallic hydrogen. We'll talk about hydrogen and its compounds and hydrides and hydrogen fuel economy in a separate program. For now, we close this session, and I wish, if you are watching this in my YouTube channel, SST Chemistry, I wish you have enjoyed this program. This program will be different from the organic program and physical program that we used to do, where I used to write a lot of things, and I used to take up an example, numerical example to calculate, and you are asked to write many more things. But in inorganic, we will not be, wasting the time. We can't afford to, wasting up so much of time. Rather, we understand, we are exposed, and we prepare notes. If you have liked this, you can give a thumbs up. And if you have not yet subscribed to my channel, please do so if you like that. And if you want to be a part of my program. Bye-bye.